Ferrari may have found the one detail Mercedes hoped nobody would turn into a weapon. Because George Russell's Austrian pole looked perfect for about 3 seconds. Then the question started. Max Verstappen had crashed. Yellow flags were out. Kimi Antonelli had backed off. Charles Leclerc was close to stealing the front row moment for Ferrari. And Russell still crossed the line fastest. That is why this is no longer just a pole lap. It is a pressure test. If Ferrari can prove Russell gained an advantage through the yellow flag zone, Mercedes could lose far more than grid position. They could lose trust, momentum, and control of an already fragile title fight. Russell says he reacted. Mercedes will defend him. But Ferrari only needs one thing. A sector trace. A throttle pattern. One piece of data that makes the lap look less like genius, and more like a breach. And the most dangerous part is not even the possible penalty. It is what this exposes inside Mercedes. One driver chose caution. One driver took the reward. And now Ferrari may have found the exact crack that turns Russell's pole into Mercedes' biggest problem. Subscribe to the channel. The first thing that makes this story so dangerous is that Ferrari does not need to prove a massive scandal to hurt Mercedes. They only need to make one lap look questionable. That is the brutal reality of Formula One at the front. When the margins are tiny, when the championship pressure is rising, when two teams are fighting over tenths instead of seconds, a single doubt can become a weapon. And Russell's pole lap gave Ferrari exactly the kind of doubt a rival team looks for. Because this was not a clean, quiet, simple qualifying finish. It was chaos. Verstappen crashed at turn 9. Yellow flags appeared. The final seconds of the session were suddenly loaded with confusion. Drivers were still finishing laps. Teams were staring at timing screens. Ferrari believed Charles Leclerc had a real chance to stand at the top of the order. Then Russell arrived. And the timing screen changed. Mercedes had pole. Ferrari had questions. That is where the entire controversy begins, because in Formula One, the clock tells you who was fastest, but the rulebook decides whether that speed was allowed to count. And when yellow flags are involved, speed becomes suspicious immediately. A yellow flag is not just a warning light. It is the sport telling drivers that something ahead is not safe. It means danger. It means a car may be off track. It means debris may be nearby. It means the driver must slow down and be prepared for anything. That sounds simple. But it becomes complicated the moment a driver still sets a lap good enough for pole. Because then the paddock asks the question that Mercedes hates most. Did Russell slow because he respected the danger, or did he slow just enough to protect the lap? That difference is everything. From Mercedes' side, Russell's defense is obvious. He reacted. He lifted. He did not ignore the yellow. The lap survived because, under the official interpretation, he showed enough reduction in speed. But from Ferrari's side, the emotional picture looks different. Their driver was close. The session had been thrown into uncertainty by Verstappen's crash. One Mercedes driver, Kimi Antonelli, backed out when the yellow appeared. And Russell still finished the lap and took the biggest reward possible. Ferrari does not need to invent tension there. The tension is already built into the sequence. One car crashes. One driver backs out. Another driver goes fastest. That is the kind of sequence that makes engineers reach for the data. Because in this sport, teams do not only watch the television feed. They study traces. They compare sectors. They look for patterns in speed, throttle, braking, and timing. They try to understand whether the driver gained something where he should have been losing. And that is why the idea of new evidence sounds so threatening. Not because it has to be dramatic. Not because it has to be a secret radio message or some impossible discovery. It could be something far colder. A speed comparison. A throttle trace. A sector delta. A moment where the car's behavior does not match the story being told. That is what makes data terrifying in Formula One. It does not shout. It does not care about reputation. It does not care that Russell is trying to fight his way back into the championship picture. It does not care that Mercedes needs stability. It only shows what happened. And if Ferrari believes that data creates a stronger case against Russell, then Mercedes has a serious problem, even before any official penalty appears. Because the first damage is not always sporting. Sometimes, the first damage is reputational. Russell needs his pole laps to feel clean. He needs them to feel undeniable. He needs Mercedes to see him as the driver who delivers under pressure, not the driver who keeps dragging the team into stewarding arguments. That matters more now than it would in a normal season. Because Russell is not only fighting Ferrari. He is also fighting the growing weight of Kimi Antonelli inside Mercedes. Antonelli has changed the atmosphere. He is not just a young driver waiting for the future. He is already part of the present. He is already a serious reference point. And when a young teammate starts looking like a championship leader, every Russell moment becomes more sensitive. A win becomes a statement. A mistake becomes a warning. A pole becomes proof. But a controversial pole becomes something else entirely. It becomes a question. And in a team like Mercedes, questions do not stay outside the garage. They walk straight in. Because Antonelli's reaction to the yellow flag matters. He backed out. He chose caution. He removed the risk of having his own lap judged, challenged, or deleted. Russell chose a different path. He managed the yellow, kept the lap alive, and took pole. Both choices can be defended. But only one was rewarded. That is the detail Ferrari can quietly use against Mercedes, because it does not only challenge Russell. It challenges the balance inside the team. Imagine being Antonelli in that moment. You see the warning. You give up the lap because you believe the safe choice is the right choice. Then your teammate completes his lap, takes pole, and the team celebrates while also defending him from controversy. Even if Antonelli accepts the decision, the lesson is impossible to ignore. Caution cost him. Risk paid Russell. That is how internal tension starts. Not with a public argument. Not with drivers blaming each other. Not with a dramatic confrontation in the garage. It starts with a feeling. A feeling that one driver sacrificed more than the other. A feeling that one driver accepted risk and was protected by the result. A feeling that next time, maybe caution is too expensive. That is why Ferrari's pressure is so clever. They do not only threaten Russell's pole. They force Mercedes to explain what kind of behavior they want from their drivers when the next yellow flag appears. Do they want the Antonelli approach, complete caution, no controversy, no risk? Or do they accept the Russell approach, calculated reaction, controlled lift, and trust the data later? That is not a simple question. Because Formula One rewards aggression. The best drivers in the world are trained to live at the limit. They are trained to lose as little time as possible. They are trained to turn every regulation into a boundary they can approach without crossing. But yellow flags are supposed to be different. A yellow flag is not an invitation to optimize. It is a warning. It is the moment the sport says, the lap is no longer the only thing that matters. And that is why Russell's pole feels so uncomfortable to so many people. Even if the lap can be defended under the rules, the feeling remains strange. A crash happened. A warning appeared. One driver abandoned the lap. Another driver took pole. That image is powerful. Ferrari knows it. Mercedes knows it. Russell knows it. And the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile knows it too, because every yellow flag case becomes a test of consistency. If Russell is cleared, Ferrari can ask whether the standard is too soft. If Russell is punished, Mercedes can argue the data was misread or the rule applied too harshly. If the decision turns on the difference between single yellow and double yellow, fans can ask whether the flag classification itself was correct. There is no clean escape. That is what makes the story so dangerous. Mercedes can win the ruling and still lose part of the narrative. Because the narrative is no longer just, Russell was fastest. It is, Russell was fastest through controversy. And that is a much weaker position for a team trying to project control. Ferrari's frustration also makes sense because of the bigger season picture. Mercedes has been the team everyone is trying to catch. Russell and Antonelli have kept the silver cars at the center of the championship. Ferrari needed openings. They needed moments where Mercedes looked exposed. And Austria gave them one. Not through pure pace. Through uncertainty. That can be even more useful. When a rival looks unbeatable on speed, you attack process. You attack decisions. You attack gray areas. You make them defend themselves in places where performance cannot protect them. A car can be fast, but it cannot outrun a stewarding question. That is why Ferrari's possible evidence matters so much to the story. It places Mercedes in a defensive posture. It forces Russell's lap to be explained. It makes every phrase from Toto Wolff sound like part of a legal argument, not just a celebration. And for Russell, that is exhausting. A driver wants pole to feel like a release. The job is done. The lap was delivered. The team can breathe. Instead, Russell gets pole and immediately has to justify it. He has to say he lifted. Mercedes has to say he lost time. The stewards have to be mentioned. The yellow flag has to be explained. That is not the feeling of a clean triumph. That is the feeling of a result under examination. And the longer the debate continues, the more it helps Ferrari. Because Ferrari does not need every fan to believe Russell is guilty. They only need enough people to believe the question is valid. Once the question feels valid, Mercedes loses the clean emotional win. Leclerc's near miss becomes more painful. Hamilton's presence near the front becomes more relevant. Antonelli's aborted lap becomes a comparison point. Russell's pole becomes a dispute. And Ferrari becomes the team pushing for accountability. That is a strong position, especially when safety is part of the conversation. Nobody wants to sound casual about yellow flags. Nobody wants to say danger should be treated like a technicality. So Mercedes has to defend Russell carefully. They cannot sound arrogant. They cannot sound dismissive. They cannot make it seem as if a yellow flag is just another obstacle in a qualifying lap. They have to say he respected the warning, without making it sound like the warning barely mattered. That is a very narrow line. And in Formula One, narrow lines are where mistakes happen. The deeper issue is that Russell's past makes this harder to shut down. He has had yellow flag penalties earlier in his career. Those old cases do not prove anything about Austria. They do not change what happened in this specific lap. But they do affect perception. Formula One remembers. Rivals remember. Fans remember. So when Russell is involved in another yellow flag debate, the reaction becomes louder than it might be for someone else. It feels like history returning. And history is a dangerous thing when a driver is trying to convince the world he is ready to lead a championship campaign. Because champions are not only judged by speed. They are judged by control. Control under pressure. Control when the car is on the limit. Control when the rulebook suddenly matters as much as the stopwatch. Russell showed speed in Austria. But Ferrari's challenge, real or implied, attacks his control. Did he judge the yellow flag perfectly? Or did he get close enough to the limit that Ferrari could turn the moment into a weapon? That question is now part of the weekend. And it is exactly the kind of question Mercedes does not want around its driver while the internal title fight is heating up. Because if Russell is seen as risky, Antonelli's image changes. Antonelli starts to look like the calmer option. The safer option. The driver who protects the team when the situation becomes unclear. That may not be fair to Russell, but perception rarely waits for fairness. It moves quickly. It builds stories. And Ferrari can benefit from that without saying much at all. The real danger for Mercedes is not only that Ferrari might attack one result. It is that Ferrari might help define the difference between the two Mercedes drivers. Russell, aggressive, fast, controversial. Antonelli, composed, cautious, clean. That contrast is powerful. And once a contrast becomes popular, it is hard to kill. Mercedes has to prevent that from happening. They need Russell's aggression. They need his ability to deliver when the lap is alive and the pressure is maximum. They cannot turn him into a cautious driver overnight, because that would take away part of what makes him dangerous. But they also need him to avoid giving rivals easy stories. Because every controversy costs energy. Every stewarding debate invites pressure. Every yellow flag question makes the team look less comfortable. And in a championship fight, comfort matters. The most successful teams do not only have speed. They have calm. They know how to make rivals feel like nothing can shake them. Austria did not feel like that. Austria felt like a weakness had been exposed. Maybe not a legal weakness. Maybe not a punishable weakness. But a psychological one. Ferrari saw a moment where Mercedes could be questioned, and in Formula One, that is valuable. Because once a rival team is forced to explain, it is no longer fully attacking. It is defending. And defending changes the rhythm of a weekend. It changes the press conference. It changes the team briefing. It changes the emotional balance between teammates. It changes how the first corner feels when the pole sitter knows half the paddock still wants to talk about the lap that put him there. That is the pressure Russell now carries. He may have the pole. He may have the official support. He may have Mercedes behind him. But he also has Ferrari watching, Antonelli comparing, and the paddock waiting for the next detail. That is what makes this block of the story so important. Because before we even reach the deeper evidence, before we even ask whether Ferrari can build a serious case, we already know the damage has started. The pole is no longer just a pole. It is a debate. The lap is no longer just a lap. It is a test of trust. And Mercedes is no longer simply celebrating Russell's speed. They are defending the judgment that came with it.